Modernism Trail of Katowice. Post-war Poland on May 3, 1923. The Society of People's Reading Rooms throughout the country organized a fundraiser for their purposes in individual branches. In Upper Silesia, it was a record amount for which the society purchased a plot of land in the center of Katowice. In 1927, the Silesian Parliament allocated 250,000 zlotys for the construction of the educational house. What we see today is a block consisting of 3 cuboids, 2 lying and forming a corner and 1 between them, raised up and hanging on the pillars. What catches the eye from the outside are profiled linear and vertical window strips. Ms. Barbara Zygmanska, who is visiting us today. Ms. Barbara is the author of Tourist Guide Studies and participated in the project, Together to the Summits, where together with disabled people won the crown of Polish mountains, will guide us along the route of Katowice modernity. Miss, what we could have already explored here, and our second guest today will be Piotr Fuglewicz, social activist, IT entrepreneur, and above all, an enthusiast of Silesia and history. Let's go back to the beginning. However, the authors of the building design, let's recall the educational house at 12 Francuska Street, where Józef Rybicki and Stanislav Tabienski, the building was put into use in 1934. How did his fate continue? Miss Barbara? Miss Barbara said, referring to who is the author of the design of this building, I would like to talk about Stanislav Tabienski, because I personally find the most fascinating works of this architect. So I can say, he worked for several epochs in architecture, from Art Nouveau through Expressionism, Modernism, and also in the post-war years. He also created in the 1950s. But all the buildings that he designed have a certain characteristic feature. I would say so, referring to Expressionism to some extent. The work of Stanislav Tabienski is, among others, the building of the bank, which is located in the market square of Katowice, as well as the house for the bank's employees at Narcyzu Street. This is a street near Kościuszko, and all of his works have a certain characteristic Expressionism-related feature. However, when it comes to the library, it is the library. It was the Silesian Library that occupied this building until 1998, until a new beautiful design was erected on the Council of Europe Square, while the building remained. The library was still the owner of the building, and the so-called educational house was set up there, i.e. a place where meetings, conferences, and exhibitions are held, including the office of the popular youth writer Alfred Szklarski, a writer who has always been associated with Katowice, his furniture and equipment. After the writer's death, the entire cabinet was handed over by the family to the Silesian Library, and this is where the room that can be visited. Mr. Piotr said, perhaps it is worth adding that this building is very original because on the one hand, it still has elements of a preceding or coexisting style, but slightly earlier than functionalism/modernism. But on the other hand, it already has the horizontal stripes of windows, which are quite characteristic of all modernistic Katowice architecture, and so on. Again, if we are talking about curiosities, this building became a model for 2 buildings that Jarek Kwaśniewicz. Gerlotka designed the new building of the Silesian Library, in some way referring to this building, because we also have such a structure with such a sharp beak at the front. What's more fun, it has also become a model of a building which is a normal residential house in Katowice on Sobieskiego Street, which in some way repeats the idea of this building. Architecture is the art of quotation, and if we look at this modernistic architecture of Katowice, it is very clear how these houses repeat some of their motifs. The second building of Tabienski, i.e. the building of the national economy on the market, is a racked building. You may remember it, and if not, come to Katowice to see it, because the street was inclined to avoid boredom. Tabienski made a stepped structure. Anyway, returning to our library, in the room where the reading room used to be, now there is a room where various events of very high cultural value take place. Also, the building that was built to educate the people, because there were times you mentioned in the introduction that, let's say, more affluent and enlightened people took care that simple people, perhaps less rich, had access to culture. Back then, however, they cared for common wisdom. The Silesian Library continues these traditions in this building. Lecturer said, "Yes, it was supposed to be a place where reading was primarily promoted." Still referring to what you said earlier about the very modernist style to which we want to introduce our listeners. Could you mention what it is characterized by? Mrs. Barbara said, "The modernist style was primarily a style for people in which to live comfortably. If a tenement house was built, there were beautiful, large, well-lit apartments with large windows and comfortable wide staircases. They are characterized by, for example, beautiful metal handrails. Many of these staircases have survived to this day. Also, in the educational house which we are talking about, there is a beautiful staircase and many very nice details have been preserved there, such as, for example, clinks and radiator covers. Various little things that have been preserved virtually without any changes since then. Going back to modern times in general, as I said, it was supposed to be an apartment. It was comfortable to live there. If it was a school building, it was perfectly suited to its function. There were many schools in the modernist period, both in Katowice and generally in Silesia. In neighboring cities, if it was a town hall building, for example, we have a town hall in Chorzów. We have a town hall in Janów, which are also built in modernist style. So it was a building perfectly suited to its functions for officials. That is why modernism is often called functionalism." Mr. Piotr said, "In Katowice, an additional element was architectural war with Germany. Silesia was divided in half by the border, and both sides, German and Poland, tried to show that their peace was better. That is why very good architects were brought in and a lot of money was allocated for the construction of buildings, thanks to which visiting Silesia today is very interesting. Because we have very modernistic buildings, in general, the concept of modernity is quite a broad concept. Here, universities have several different divisions. We generally use the term modern here as something new, something that compared to architecture of the First World War, that is, whether it was Art Nouveau or classicizing, it was a complete shift in emphasis on the purpose of the building. The building was supposed to exist so that it would be good. The second thing is also very important. At that time, architects used to design almost everything in given houses. For example, for the Katowice skyscraper, a separate typeface was designed to mark the apartment numbers. So the building in that approach was something total. It was made so that every detail of it was part of the whole, that it corresponded with it. Interestingly, what novelty it was not considered to be something really important for many years. Many art critics have treated it as modernity, with, let's say, some indulgence, only for about 20 or 30 years, thanks to the research of Silesian scholars, and not only the beginning to be treated as a serious relic. Lecturer said, "We also invite all listeners, not only those who love reading, but also fans of architecture, to visit the educational house at Francuska 12. It is impossible to miss it. We invite you. You can come in, and it is in such small details that you can still see modernistic decorative elements. Thank you for today, and in the next episode, I invite you to another interview. This time, we will talk about the building of Silesian Provincial Office and the building of the independent offices. I would also like to thank my guests. Until next time." This project is funded by government budgets. The podcasts have been read by Braden Buddy.